Okay, I'm going to do a series of videos specific to the Department of Education, Federal Department of Education, the potential closure, restructuring, dismantling, whatever you want to call it. Choose your poison. So yes, Trump gave an executive order to McMahon to dismantle and slowly dismantle the Department of Education. I don't know how that's going to work, nor do I care. Does it infect me? No, it does not. I know that you're going to sit there, James, how can you say that? Guys, I've been doing it 16 years. I haven't seen anything from the Federal Department of Education that helps me. I haven't seen anything. I haven't seen anybody volunteer to, help me on my advocacy from it just, they're not there. Okay. I understand sort of what their role is, but with the amount of money that they spend per year and the sheer number of employees, and I know statistically how many weren't going to work post-COVID because the federal government just was too lax and didn't require them to come back to work. A lot of them didn't. And so do I agree with that? No, I have to go to work. You guys have to go to work, So I don't care that they work for government. If they're not effective, if they're not doing their job, then those are less resources that could be going to our kids and to a real significant purpose of more staff, raises for our teachers on a local level, more training, more focused training. And I can tell you, if that's part of their responsibility is to help with regards to IDEA compliance on understanding the rules, they're doing a really crappy job. Okay? So I'm not that concerned or scared about the potential reshifting and reshaping on a federal level. I hope it's lean, I hope it's mean, and I hope that it is very focused on its duties instead of what it currently is and what it was grown into to where it's just this wasteful behemoth up there that just wastes money. Okay? Now, as far as the parts of it that are very specialized in its focus, like IDEA, 504, guys, those aren't going to go away. Those are civil rights acts. Congress voted those in. There's not funding attached to 504, but it's a Civil Rights Act. If a public institution or even a private school, like a Catholic school, accepts federal dollars, then they're on the hook for 504. That's not going away. I don't care where you put it. Okay, in fact, components of it already exist inside Health and Human Services. There's crossover responsibilities. So this whole idea and the stuff that's going on out there with regards to the misinformation and the half-truths intended to get you emotional and riddle you with anxiety and stress that somehow this is going to negatively impact your children, I just don't see it. Like I said, been doing this for 16 years. Haven't seen them help me once. As a parent or as an advocate fighting for your children. Okay? So I just don't think those responsibilities. I've already seen where Trump recommended moving it into Health and Human Services, which Health and Human Services guys, by the way, they oversee Head Start. Head Start, a lot of schools have Head Starts inside their public schools. That's overseen by Health and Human Services, not by the Education Department. Moving the student loans over to the Small Business Administration, okay, makes sense. It shouldn't be inside the Department of Education. So I don't have a problem with that. With regards to the IDEA also being moved over to Health and Human Services, the Education Department prior to 1979, when President Carter created it as its own standalone department, was inside of Health and Human Services. Now, it had a different name, Health, Education, and Welfare. It was a huge agency that was split up into multiple, including the Department of Education. So the Federal Department of Education existed prior to 1979 under, I think it was the Office of Education within the Department of Health, Education, and Welfare, which is the Department of Health and Human Services, which once again, I think RFK Jr. Oversees that department now. Okay, and I saw him tweet out, we're more than capable of taking care of IDEA. So, you see, it's not going away. In fact, before, I don't care, guys, I have no opinion. I'm not going to sit there and get myself all worked up over the next 4 years, on who sits in the golden chair in Washington. It just doesn't bother me. Guys, I've lived through since Obama, Trump, Biden, now Trump again, and I haven't seen a hill of difference. We roll with the changes that need to happen. And, I can't predict what those might be. But I tell you what, after 2008, when we had the financial downturn in this country, right when Obama came into office, I didn't see everybody up there wanting to pillage and destroy Washington because the Obama administration permitted the states to reduce their special education obligations with their maintenance of effort, their MOE, by millions of dollars. Now, the Obama administration said Well, you still have to provide the same level of FAPE, guys. I can tell you, I was on the ground. I wasn't up there in Washington making these decisions to allow millions of dollars in state reductions in special education funding, where the bulk of our special education funding comes from. It doesn't come from the feds. That's a contribution. Got that? So it didn't come from the feds, or it doesn't, majority doesn't come from the feds. So to have them reduce millions and millions of dollars and still provide the same level of FAPE, I had to deal with that on local levels, and it took years for that to come back. And in some ways, we never regained teacher units. And in a lot of ways, we didn't regain aides. Now, what's the other thing that we had to, well, with the Affordable Care Act, well, schools are businesses as well. They had increased costs because now you had to sit there and pick the platinum plan or the gold plan or the silver plan, and they didn't want to do that. And so therefore, we saw a lot of schools throughout the country shed their paraprofessionals and their support staff, and then got into, now what was the workaround? Kelly Temporary Services and other temp agencies built up their education servicing department because they had an exemption under the Affordable Care Act to where they didn't have to offer that if they were temp employees having X number of reduced hours, okay? And then the schools would hire those same people back from the temp agency. Well, what ends up happening? Higher turnover, you can't maintain the level of staff training and staff accountability. So you see, there are consequences to well-intentioned governmental acts. And I just have to roll with them as they happen. I can't sit there and freak out, but I can tell you we're still dealing with that. This many years later, we still have a problem with paraprofessional and aid staff support coming out of temp agencies that the schools are not hiring in-house. So therefore, we have high rates of turnover. We cannot maintain a continuity of training and servicing of a lot of our kids that require that consistency and that continuity. Okay, we're still dealing with that. It's a consequence and it's a fallout from the Affordable Care Act. Did you know that? Do you sit there and go, well, what does that have to do with the IDEA? So many governmental decisions and governmental acts and laws ripple over and negatively impact IDEA without you even knowing it, guys. Okay, that's my job. I sit there and I look for the blind spots, and I'm telling you, they're all over the place. And that's why I have Advocate University. That's why I have this page, so that part of the things that we teach in Advocate University is to look for all of those intersectional governmental laws and rules that when they put them into place, it sounded good. But a lot of those have negatively impacted our kids, and it crosses over and impacts the implementation of an IEP, even the ability to implement an IEP. Reading, that's a big one. Every Student Succeeds Act, you have response to intervention. You have, there's all of these different things that collide and that cause a negative impact. Okay, so the fact that Trump is now, talking about potentially dismantling the Department of Education and moving things here and there, and I just, okay. Another misinformation that I've seen out there. Oh, kids aren't going to get their lunches. Because school lunches, that's within the Department of Agriculture. Okay, that's where food comes from. It's the Department of Agriculture. Now, some of the funding, I'm going to do another video just nailing it down to explain federal funding doesn't just flow naturally. It comes in the form of grants. It comes in the form of grants because of what I told you in the beginning. Okay, each one of these schools, local schools, because we live in a bottom-up society when it comes to the schools, not a top-down. Federal government has very, very little control over our local schools. So the only way that they are able to exert that control is through their mechanisms of funding that come with strings. You will get this funding if you do X, Y, and Z in the way that we want you to. Schools as states can opt to do it or not. And I don't care who the president is. I don't care what political party's in control. They have been manipulating our local schools. Both sides, I think the Democrats have done it far, far more often than the Republicans, and far more effective at it. I'm not saying I agree with it because there's a lot of ideological damage that's been done by circumventing the democratic process. And that's exactly what have been done the past 4 years, which is why we're seeing these reactions coming out of the Republican, or what you would consider conservative or the right. I don't really care as far as that dynamic. I'm just telling you that there's consequences for pushing those political pendulums. Okay? You're not always going to be in power, guys. So you got to be careful in how you exercise it when you have it, because when it's not your turn, there's going to be some payback. And that's what I'm seeing right now. Now, whether you agree with it or not is inconsequential. The thing that upsets me is that I've been warning that naturally, historically, you can see that the ones that suffer the most are the ones with little to no voice in this country. We are largely the voice of our children with disabilities. But I can tell you that there's been some abuses over the past 4 years that have upset the states, that have upset a lot of people in this country, and there's going to be a rebalancing. And, you know, unfortunately, there was a few movements, fringe movements out there that co-opted our language, co-opted the way that we fight for our kids, and pushed it into their movement. And so it muddied the lines as far as that's concerned. And, you know, I think that what needs to be done, or the smart thing that we need to do, is we need to make sure that we help separate those lines so that our children with disabilities, our children with special needs, that is a complete separate thing from some of the fringe that circumvented the democratic process in trying to get itself solidified inside of our schools. All right? You know, I believe in the democratic process. I do. But I don't believe in circumventing that process using civil rights that are supposed to be for this specific purpose, and that's disabilities and special needs, okay? And there's some fallout because of that. But I warned 3 years ago, 4 years ago, that this stuff was happening. And, you know, I could see it then because, like I said, guys, I see this stuff close up. I see it real raw. I see it personal, okay? And, you know, unfortunately, the stuff snowballs, and then everybody else can see it later. But, you know, the lines get, because people are out there writing articles, people are out there pushing agendas, and you got to be smart enough not to get emotional and caught up into it. You need the right information. Just right, unemotional, logical, reasoned information so that you can make a decision. I'm not concerned about the IDEA going away. I'm not concerned about 504 going away. They're not going to go away. They're just going to go somewhere else. And like I said, been doing this long enough. I haven't seen any help from the Federal Department of Education. And OCR has just been as backed up and, you know, focused on their agendas, you know, backlogged on 504 specific disability related issues. And then the other thing is, guys, you know, I don't, well, I'll save that for a different video.